I'm sitting over there. Hello. Hi. Welcome, everybody. We are so glad to have you all tonight. We are very excited for this event. If you can't tell, we're a little excited. So welcome to Hill Center. For how many of you is this your first time to Hill Center? That's great. We appreciate that. We appreciate you coming. Love to hear that the word is spreading about this fantastic institution. We also want to welcome our friends from Arcadia Center for Sustainable Food and Agriculture. They do incredible work near and far. I specifically am in love with their veteran farmer program, but they do all sorts of fantastic things. We also want to welcome our Facebook Live audience. And for any of you that don't already, please follow us on Facebook and Instagram and all those good things. Just a reminder to please put your cell phones on silent. I can't ask you to turn them off, I know, but silent will do it. We want to thank Bill Press for this amazing series that he has put together. I know many of you in the room have come to several of these events. We want to thank him and his producer, Megan Rosenfeld, for getting these programs on the books for us, and we could not run Hill Center without you, Bill. So we appreciate it. Thank you guys. And of course, tonight we want to welcome Alice Waters from all the way from California. We appreciate you so much coming, and we're honored to have you. Thank you guys so much.
All right. Thank you, Charlotte, and thank you all so much for coming this evening. It's great to see you for a very special conversation with Alice Waters and the way they work. All of our programs work, for those who haven't been here, sort of a half an hour conversation with me and Alice, and then we will open it up to all of you to join in the conversation with any questions that you might have. We have been doing this program now, Talk of the Hill, for maybe 5 years. And we've had some very wonderful, interesting, and important guests. Several United States senators, members of Congress, cabinet secretaries, a justice of the Supreme Court, many well-known and important journalists in Washington, a bishop and a nun. We have never had a guest who has changed the direction of an entire country, if not the entire world. Because Alice Waters has really changed the way we think about food, the way we shop, the way we prepare our food, the way we eat, we enjoy our food, and how, what, and where we eat. It's all changed due to the magic of Alice Waters, a little restaurant called Chez Panisse that she founded and created 46 years ago in August of 2017, Alice. And it is so exciting. Alice is here in Washington for a few days with several events, and her number one stop, her first stop, is right here at the Hill Center. Thank you, Alice. Now, it didn't start at Chez Panisse. It's like there was an entire lifetime leading up to the creation of Chez Panisse, which she tells in this wonderful, fun read, Coming to My Senses, the making of a counterculture cook. And if you haven't already purchased a copy, there are books for sale in the adjoining room here, and Alice will be glad to sign a few books for you, as many as you buy. After the event. So Alice, just in terms of coming a long way, you talk about your family dinners at home. Where you talk about some things that maybe a lot of us might sound familiar to all of us, that the menu might have varied from casserole with ground chuck to hot dogs with cheddar cheese and bacon, meatloaf with tomato sauce, chop suey from a can, iceberg lettuce with wishbone dressing from a bottle, and frozen fish sticks. And then you went to college, and then you went to France. And what happened?
I was extremely lucky because I went to France 1965. And France was a snow food nation. And kids came home and spent 2 hours at lunchtime eating with their families. And you had to go to the market twice a day, the street markets, because you could get something better in the evening, fresher. And so I really felt like I had never really eaten before. And I was immediately seduced by the, of course, hot baguette coming right out of apricot jam. I'd never eaten an oyster before, even though I lived in New Jersey and we went down to the coast in the summers. But I never really had a real fish until actually one time when I was about 10 years old, my uncle took me deep sea fishing and I caught a tuna. And my mother actually tried to cook that. And of course, I know now that when you catch it yourself and when you're involved in the cooking, you eat it no matter what. Anyway, but France was kind of a revelation to me. And I thought Paris was so beautiful. And there were these little restaurants, and we went out with French friends, and they were so particular about everything, you know. We were going to eat in a certain way. We would have our hors d'oeuvre first, and then you would have the main dish. Then you would have a salad, and then you would have dessert, but not very big, and not too sweet. And so this idea of a menu just became part of my thinking. And in fact, when we opened up Chez Panisse, we only had one menu. And we still only have one menu downstairs in the restaurant. So it was just, I guess, I was open and ready to be seduced. But I can't believe how deep it was, the awakening, and how important it was in my life. And when I came back, I just said, I want to live like the French. And that's what I've been trying to do. You know, I almost opened a creperie in Berkeley because I went out to Brittany and I tasted those buckwheat crepes, and we drank cider with them. And we always had such a good time. I never knew that it was hard cider. until I investigated opening a creperie in Berkeley. And they said, well, you need to have a wine and beer license to have hard cider. And then my other friend said, my business friend said, you know, if you want people to really hang out and be there, and, you know, you're not going to make any money with selling crepes. And in fact, it's not a good idea at all. And so that was the end of that.
You know, in preparing for tonight, if you Google Alice Waters, I was struck by one of the first things that comes up are pages and pages of quotes from Alice Waters. Alice Waters quotes. And I found that you've just about said everything already that I'd be interested to hear you say. So I want to do something I've never done before in an interview and read you some of your quotes and ask you to elaborate on them. And I think this one sort of summed up maybe what you've been talking about for a long time. You said at one point, quote, "It's around the table and in the preparation of food that we learn about ourselves and the world."
Well, I do believe that. And you know that 85% of the kids in this country don't eat any meal with their family anymore. And the 25% eat it in the car. I think it's more important. I mean, I just remember that Francine Duplessis Gray said, you know, the dinner table is the primary right of civilization. And it really, for me, it really is. It's like that moment in the day where you stop. It's not a run-on sentence, you know. You just never, one day just goes into the next. And they pause. And even though we had to come to the table every night at 7 o'clock, and you had to eat all your food on your plate, and you heard the menu, okay? And I had a hard time eating it. I was very picky eater from the beginning. I don't know where that came from. Maybe just the genes. But in the summer, though, we had an amazing pleasure because my parents had Victory Garden during the war. And so we had corn and the best tomatoes ever out of that garden. And I do still love them to this day. And I love them better than any tomatoes and corn you can get in California. Something about humidity on the East Coast that is important for the tomatoes, you know, deep taste.
New Jersey tomatoes.
New Jersey. It used to be the Garden State, remember?
That was before Chris Christie. I didn't even get political.
Go ahead. Do you think food is the most political?
Well, actually, that's my next quote. Where Alice says, "The art of eating is very political. You buy from the right people, you support the right network of farmers and suppliers who care about the land and what they put in the food." So it all comes together, right?
It does. And every day we have 2 or 3 opportunities to support a set of values that really could change the world. So I'm to eating with determination. Vote with your fork.
But so how, in terms of this connection, you're talking about buying from the right suppliers. Who are they? Where do you find them? How do you support them?
Well, you know, at the beginning of Chevanese, I was looking for taste. I was just, maybe I knew something from the 60s of Diet for a Small Planet. I knew those things in the back of my mind, grow your own, and all of that. But I was looking for taste. And I ended up at the doorsteps of the organic local farmers. They're the ones that had the seeds, that had the varietals, that were interesting to me, and of course the taste there. And as soon as we made the connection that the success of the restaurant depended on those farmers, we celebrated them and put their names on the menu. And people now come into Chevanese and they say, "Are Bob's peaches here yet?" Or, "Where are those Bronx grapes, that are only have like a 2-week, 3-week window at Chevanese, but they remember it and they come back for that." And so for me, I just feel like I could win anybody over with a great peach.
Which raises a question of, don't these great peaches cost more? And can everybody afford to eat well and buy from the right suppliers?
Well, we can't afford it if we spend most of our income on other things. You know that we used to spend a lot of money on food. We've always, since the beginning of time, thought of food as something precious, where you spend all of your money. And all of a sudden, Fast food came in and said, it should be cheap. Fast, cheap, and easy.
And the same.
And the same. Uniformity. Availability, 24/7. Forget about seasonality. Cooking is drudgery. Farming is drudgery. Get that food delivered. There's always more where that came from. Don't worry about wasting it. Now, we never wasted food. We knew how to cook. And I think, and I really do believe, that if you know how to cook, you can eat very economically. When you do it from day to day, when you're starting, when you're not in the rhythm, you're not making that stock out of the leftover of the chicken. I always say that I can get 3 meals out of that expensive organic chicken for a family of 4. As I say, Jose Andres says he can get 6. I'm going to be speaking with him tomorrow. Next day. I'm just going to ask him about the other 3. But it's knowing how to cook simply and to use the whole vegetable. I keep thinking about how I always threw out chard stems because you're supposed to take the stems off, but no, you just slice those up differently and throw them in with the chard, rainbow chard, and they're just beautiful in the dish. So it's really about very simple techniques of cooking, and keeping and really going directly to the farmer and connecting, buying. Don't have the middleman to, in a grocery store, go right to the farmer and give him the money or her the money.
Speaking of waste, I've seen the number. We waste something like 40% of our food.
Well, we're into giving huge portions. And I always ask for half portions wherever I go. I need, even at Japanese, I need a half portion. Even though we're not piling up the plate at all. And I always have salad on the plate. It's always part of it. But we become accustomed. We're not getting, our money's worth. Very important fast food idea. And because you want to get more. More is better. More is better. Time is money. 2 other values of our culture. And most people eat fast food in this country.
One big project of yours, about a couple of miles from here, you have said, quote, basically, the person in the White House should be principled, should have a philosophy about food that relates directly to organic agriculture. How's that going?
Splendid. Well, it's given us a lot of momentum in the other direction. And I'll tell you about that when you're ready to know.
I'm ready.
You're ready? You're ready for this?
But
I think we have to do it ourselves. We have to do this ourselves. We have to go into the public schools and we have to feed our children real food and support the farmers directly who are taking care of the planet. So I have an idea that we could have school lunch as an academic subject so that we could get the time and focus we need to not eat a good lunch standing up in a line. And we don't want to just grab it and throw half of it away because we don't know how to serve ourselves and serve serve too much and all of that. We want to sit down together and have a real school lunch. So we dreamed up this idea, the Edible Schoolyard Project, and the kids were studying the Silk Road in India. And we made this placemat. And so that you could really relate it to what your classwork was about. And then we served them the food that you might eat on the Silk Road. So a dal, a beautiful Indian lentil soup, and maybe a papadum, or maybe a paratha, and maybe some yogurt, spiced yogurt. Maybe there's other things we could find on the Silk Road, but something nutritious and economical. And we made a few more. This one's about civilizations of the Americas. And all the words are written in Spanish. So this could be connected to a language class. And you could actually get academic credit. You could be graded on eating your school lunch.
Right.
And I just have a few more. This one's of China. But this one I really love it. And hold up that.
Yeah.
Because we were studying the geography of the Arabian Peninsula. And we were understanding where different foods grew. And so this is what it might look like, that you're eating a tabbouleh salad, and you're eating some pita breads, and you're having a carrot soup that has some spice from the Middle East on top, and a little lettuce on the side. But this is an idea that could be embroidered on in the most incredible ways. I mean, you might be in kindergarten and have all the birds that you're learning the names of, and maybe they're eating seeds, and what seeds they're eating. And then you eat bread with the seeds on it, the poppy seeds on it, the sesame seeds for lunch. And it's like, I think it could be just really irresistible if we put our minds to it, and if we really engage the kids to help us to serve and to be part of the whole process.
And this is the next phase of the Edible School Project, which you had underway for years.
It's been almost 23 years now that we started the project in middle school in Berkeley, Martin Luther King Middle School. 1,000 kids, and they speak 22 different languages at home. So I thought it would be a good test case. Teenagers who may already be addicted to salt and sugar. And we made a garden, not to teach gardening per se, but to be a lab for learning all the other subjects, math, science. Even art is learned out in the garden. And then we made a kitchen classroom with the idea that you could teach the academics in the kitchen. Math and measuring and history and language taught there. And so this has flourished over the years. And the one truth that I know is that when kids grow it and cook it, they all eat it. No matter what, 6 weeks to kale. That's true.
A couple of, back to the book for just a second here. You quote Alan Ducasse as saying 85% of cooking is shopping for the food. Do you agree?
I completely agree with him, because it's about knowing what you need to know what seed is planted in what place, how it's being taken care of, how the plant is nourished, when it needs to be picked, and then it's brought to you, and you can cook it really simply. I mean, the big part of cooking is the knowledge about agriculture and ranching and fishing, seasonality, right? So all of that is the biggest part in my mind, the most important part of cooking.
Do you know what you're going to cook before you go to the market?
Never. I have an idea because I've been doing this for a while. And I kind of know what evens in the market in New York City in September. But there are always surprises. There are always surprises. And I go and then I come back and I put out all the food on my table and I start planning what I will eat first and how I will eat through the week. And it's just always, I look in the cookbooks then if I need a little inspiration or help about something that I bought. And I know I have a very big library of cookbooks, and so that helps. But I don't make a plan.
On a rare moment when Alice Waters is home in Berkeley by herself and you just want to cook a little comfort food for yourself, what's your favorite?
That's my favorite.
I think I have that in the book, don't I? Grilled cheese sandwich.
Yeah. I wanted you to say it.
But I cook it on a whole wheat edible schoolyard loaf of bread, and I cook it in olive oil, and I always love those mountain cheeses inside. And I fry it on both sides, and then I rub the outside with garlic. And eat it with a few dill pickles. Sauerkraut. Depends what time you eat. But these days, in the morning for breakfast, we have avocados in California, plentiful. And I just get my little organic avocado and I cut it up and I put on roasted cumin and hot pepper and salt and squeeze of lime. And then I take an organic tortilla and I just put it right on the stove and I brown it on both sides. And then I just take this beautiful avocado and put it in salt and I eat it right then. Right then when it's warm. That's what it is.
You ever go to Whole Foods and what do you think about it? And has Jeff Bezos changed it?
Where shall I begin? Well, first of all, it's not Whole Foods. But I felt compelled when I heard that he bought Whole Foods for $13.7 billion. And I put out a Twitter, which I hardly ever do. And I just said, you know, you have an opportunity to change the food system in this country. And why not really support the people that are taking care of the land? And I even went so far, I didn't say this in Twitter, but I was interviewed, and I said, why not gut all the Whole Foods and make them indoor farmers markets around the world, where the farmer can actually sell what he grows or makes. We all love to go to Europe. You could go wandering around in those indoor markets. That's what impressed me first. I went to Leon in Paris and even the smaller markets in Italy. And I really think we need that. We really need that. We need that and school supported agriculture. That's the master plan we have. We're going to do this in the state of California. And you know, in New York City, they decided to give every child, K through 12, a free school lunch.
Yeah.
That's the first step.
Yeah.
first step. But now we want them to buy the food from all those wonderful farmers in New York State and all around, so that they can give them the really nourishing food that they need.
I have, where's Charlotte? She's here, but I must say, I did make one promise, Alice, before we turn it over to your questions, that I would ask you about the most famous quote in the book and what is quoted in all the reviews of the book that I've read so far, which is on page 75, and the theme comes up several times in the book about being drunk and having sex in the back seat of cars. It's a good life.
I think I'm going to answer that.
It's in the book. Read the book.
Actually, on the JC.
Alice, thank you so much for coming. We have a microphone here, and Eli will have another one on this side of the room, so please.
All right, just a reminder to speak directly into the microphone, although this one looks a little hot. Eli, if you could turn it down. Okay, here we go.
That's good.
Hi, you mentioned that you care and you brought up the politics overlaying food. I'm schooled in I'm an environmental health scientist, so I know how food affects public health, and I also know how food production affects the environment. We didn't touch upon the environment part. Could you care to comment on that and what we can do in the environmental world to support this agricultural connection with the environment and with public health? Thanks.
I think it all comes back to education. I truly, deeply do. And we need to bring children back to nature when they're really little. I love these new schools. I don't know whether you've heard about the forest schools and the seaside schools that are happening for preschool children around the world, where they just come and they play in nature. And they have people watching over them. But this has always been a big part of Montessori pedagogy, and I was a Montessori teacher, so I really believe the kids learn by doing, by touching and smelling, rolling in the grass. But for me, when you realize where your food comes from, and you really connect, you go out there to the farm and you see, you fall in love with nature, and you make that connection in the big environmental thinking. I mean, I can never understand why environmentalists are not gastronomes, and why all gastronomes are not environmentalists. I mean, they just go together like this. And once you, I think we're so separated from nature that it's an abstract. And we're watching, what's happening in the parks on an iPhone, or a computer. We're not touching the rocks. We're not out there in the water and skipping stones and rolling down the grass. It's really important. And dreaming up some kind of food and global warming summit right now where we can make all those connections. And Al Gore is very interested in this idea because he's been so focused on everything else except the food and agriculture. And that, from my point of view, makes it so real for everybody.
This side or? Yeah.
Go ahead.
Okay, don't see a hand? Right, maybe right in front of me. Okay.
Hi. Hi, Alice. Thanks for being here. I grew up in Marin County, and I also had the privilege to live in Oregon for 6 years. So I had a very spoiled food life. I was in France for 2 years. I moved to DC about a year ago, and I had a very rude awakening that I didn't really know my own country beyond the West Coast, and just really appreciating how siloed a lot of these conversations are. So wondering when you travel other than California and New York City, what you're seeing in the rest of the country, and where, again, maybe the answer is education, where this input sort of soft spot is, because I'm just still sticking out like a sore thumb everywhere I go in DC, and the kinds of conversations I try to have. There's Mom's Organic, there's like the Glut, there's a few very small co-ops, and a few farmers markets. So just wondering if you had any illumination on that.
Well, I was just in Michigan. I was up near Traverse City and for a literary festival, and we went to a couple of the associated edible schoolyards that were up in that place, and I was so impressed with what they were doing and the biodiversity. Apparently, Michigan is only second to California, and I didn't know that. And there's a very strong farm-to-table movement there, but I know there is in Vermont. I'm searching that. I know there is in Austin, Texas. I know there is in Virginia. I know there is in all around Chicago, even in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. The most amazing organic greenhouses that Will Allen has built up there. He's an exceptional farmer, and he's growing so much food in that cold climate. And in the warmer times, he has cartoons in those greenhouses. So it's wanting to happen. And what needs to help it along is the public school system. 20% of the population in this country is in school. So if schools really took it upon themselves to buy from all of the people and to give them the stability, financial stability of that, so many young people would go into farming. It's very hard to go to take your food to a farmer's market and never know when you're going to sell it on. But just think, the schools would buy it. And that's, it's kind of what we've been doing at Chickanees for years. We have one farm now that we really support entirely. And it gives him a peace of mind to know that no matter what happens during the course of the year with his crops, we are going to pay him. So it's that connection, and it could redevelop the rural economies to be, instead of all of those big corporate farms that have been ranches all around this country, you could they don't pay any money for the crops. You could have people that were growing things really for the schools, and we're talking about very simple kinds of basic crops like beans and corn and tomatoes and carrots and lettuces. We have to do greenhousing in the winter for herbs and lettuces, but we only have tomatoes 3 months out of the year at Chickanees. 3 months. You would think the Californian, all the time. They're coming from Mexico. They aren't in Northern California, except for maybe 3 months out of the year. And so we have learned to eat within the season. We have root vegetables all winter long. We can have sometimes kale can grow outside, but vegetables, and we have dried fruits, and we use all the grains, this beautiful farro, all of those during the wintertime. We eat differently.
Yes, Derek.
I have a question based on your education, and I totally agree
Speak
with
right in the mic. please.
I totally agree that schools should be purchasing from local farmers. In DC, we have a huge lack of space, and we have inner city students who we necessarily can't purchase from farmers who are local because the schools aren't funded. Do you have a recommendation on how those students with lack of space can start their own gardens and help sustain their own cafeterias by contributing that way?
Well, that's a beautiful idea. I thought that in our acre of land, this is in the very beginning of the school year, that we could actually grow something for the school cafeteria. But of course, for 1,000 kids, we would have had to plant the whole acre with mint or whatever it was. I just was out of touch with how much it takes to feed all of these school children. And so we have to, I think the kids being in the garden, no matter whether it's attached to a school, it could be a community garden, it could be taking over a vacant lot and planting food. Now some cities that I know are planting, instead of ornamental plants around the city, they're planting food. That why not? Why not be like Seville and have orange trees lining the streets and harvest the oranges? They're doing that in Sacramento. They're making marmalade out of the oranges on the governor's property. But it's a little bit where there's a will, there's a way. And we figured out how to plant gardens on the front of the post office during World War II. We did that. I keep thinking about the garbage cans. Well, I'm so upset about being in New York and seeing the garbage all over the streets and the bags. I can't imagine that much garbage. How do they take care of it? Every day. They don't. They leave it out on the streets. My parents had a little can. It was about 18 inches high and about a foot across. And they only picked up the garbage once a week for a family of 6. But my parents, the newspapers were separated out in tin cans. Of course, there were a lot of those. But my parents put it back. They kept all their wrapping paper. They kept all the ribbons. They kept everything. They never threw anything out. And we just are put in a situation where we're given things that can't be recycled. I was just thinking about the toothpaste that I bought today. What kind of container it's in and what happens to that? And then we're asked, we can't take them on the plane, so we have to buy another container to put it in, to take it on the plane. It's endless.
Last Sunday, in terms of school, the school project, Edible School Project, there's an article that's in the Sunday New York Times about Kimball Musk. Right.
I thought you might ask me.
And what caught my attention, it wasn't even going to read it, as I saw this little clip that said, Alice Waters is one who doesn't see eye to eye with Kimball Musk. So I had to read the article then. And he says that something about your school project doesn't do scaling. What the hell is he talking about? What's the beef here?
I think he doesn't quite know what he's talking about. I like him very much personally, but I think he's coming in from the tech world and he does want to make a difference. He does want to have organic food in schools, and he does want to teach organic gardening, and he's buying all of this land. And that's really good. But the idea that this is scalable, it's a very, how should we say, it's the wrong term to use. When we're talking about we're talking about a set of values. And if you know about the values, it doesn't have to be controlled. It doesn't have to go in that predictable tech way out there. It is something that I mean, all of these edible schoolyards that are on the website are all practicing, a set of values of sustainability, around nourishment, around beauty, around interactive education. Those are the values. And it's going, those are human values, and it's just happening however it happens, in whatever kind of community it's part of. And that's the great thing. It's you get all of these cultural variations. I don't want to own the patent for scaling this. I mean, I really don't. And it's a very non-humane term.
Yes, okay, here we go. Watch out, Alice.
Well, you opened this bill with the comment about the influence of Alice over not only the United States, worldwide. I just want to tell one small story about how Alice really transformed the place. So it's about 14 years ago, I think, was when I met Alice at the American Academy in Rome.
Can I interrupt just a second to say that John Phillips is our former U.S. ambassador to Italy until just a few months ago. Honored to have you here, Mr. Ambassador.
But I was invited to come to dinner at the Academy in Rome by the director. I came, and I was sitting between two of the fellows. They have 30 fellows a year. They select very competitively from around the country. This is a 125-year-old institution. And they said, well, let me get this straight. You're in Rome on Saturday night reading at the Academy. And I said, well, why not? Until they served the food. And the food was almost inedible because the director, a very dear friend of ours, didn't want to hire people because you can't fire them. So they had these caterers that were producing food that was terrible. Anyway, this finally gave the director incentive to go to Alice, who I met through this, to say, and as a consequence, the scholars weren't eating. They weren't gathering around the table because they hated the food, and they couldn't afford to go out and eat, but they did because it was so bad. She goes to Alice. Alice, could you help us out? As I recall, Alice said, on one condition, I make the decisions. And so she proceeded to completely transform the place by coming there and directing who the chef would be, buying food from locally produced food, farm to table, just transformed. It is like the best place in Rome to eat now. Everybody comes to eat. They all gather around. The families are there, 30 scholars and their families. It has had a transformative effect on the institution itself. So your passion, I know, is getting a free lunch for every school child of the day. It's a great mission. Will wind up, even though it's expensive, to save us money on health costs in the long term. I never forget listening to an interview on NPR some years ago, interviewing immigrants who were coming to America from India. They were saying, orientation there. Look, when you come to America, especially if you're in the middle, when you come and you see these Americans, you're going to see some very fat Americans. Don't look at them. They're all over America. That's just how they are. When you think of the health costs associated with America, that is, by the way, somewhat unique in that category, and all the positive health benefits, money savings that could come from nutrition, food, and farmers that create this food that are supported by the schools. It's such a win-win idea. But someday, Alice, maybe it'll happen.
So, Academy, American Academy, bravo. We were talking about this a little earlier, and you were saying that this really, the value was it brought these people together around the table. You can elaborate on that. For their meals.
You mean the American Academy? Well, it was a very hungry group. And that's, I mean, you know, you bring something in that's tasty and they want it. And so it was a little bit like, you know, Domino's. You know, the first day we changed the food, half the fellows came. The second day, they all came. And they never left. So it's the way that I'm thinking about public education. That same kind of way of winning the kids over. And it's a very slow food idea, and of Carlo Petrini's. And he really believes it's those small farmers that are going to save us. And everybody's backyard gardens. And I totally agree with that. So it's a huge power is in food right now. And global warming contribution is up to 45% of the way that we grow food and how we ship it around the world. That is a gigantic contribution. And we just have to change our habits. Delicious, I call it a delicious revolution.
That's great.
Not hard.
Yeah, this way.
I actually didn't want to ask a question. I want to thank you. With Slow Food DC, you actually just mentioned slow food. I've heard you in Terra Madre in Italy. I've heard you on the national calls for slow food. And I really just want to thank you for all the work that you do to get the wonderful message out. And you're such a great advocate for our organization. So thank you.
All right. This time for a couple more. This lady here's had her hand up. Wow. Yeah.
Would you describe a little your journey from someone who enjoys food to amateur cook to professional chef or restaurateur? What triggered the transition?
And I talk about that in the book a lot because I felt empowered by the free speech movement in Berkeley, the anti-war movement, the civil rights movement, and I just felt like when we stopped that war, that we could do anything. If we got together and collaborated, we could do something. And I've never lost that hope. And I didn't know anything about working in a restaurant, but I just thought, I know how to cook at home. I'll just have a restaurant in the house, and my friends were, I'll get Lindsay, who knows how to make almond tarts, and she'll come and help, and it was just like that. But I knew that people would come because everybody felt connected in some way around from those times. We wanted to support the people who were doing the right thing and making places for us to gather and talk politics. And so that's really how it began. And I never, one time we burnt the soup and we had to call it roasted corn soup. There were a lot of mistakes, but people were with you and trying to help you. It was the time when I would ride my bike down to the freeway, hitchhike into San Francisco. Never tied up my bike or anything, locked it up. Would hitchhike back and pick up my bike and drive. I went camping in Turkey with a girlfriend, and we never worried about where we were going to camp, and we always felt like people wanted to help us, and I think we've been so frightened by security that we're not extending ourselves, and it just makes for more fear. And so I just think we have to just invite everybody over to stay in our houses and open the doors the way that we did back in the 60s. My doors are open. You come and stay in my house.
And we have time for one more question here in the back. Right. Hi.
Hi everyone. My name is Morgan. And Alice, I actually went to the school here this summer and visited. It's just stunning. So for many years, I worked with kids in a garden, pulling carrots and hot turnips out of the ground and eating right there, actually with Arcadia. And one of the things that I saw that the disconnect was that I became worried that these kids who were getting to taste this food here on a farm field trip weren't having the opportunity to see it again on their plates at school, or at home certainly. But for me, my first thought went to the school. So I recently started working for a local school district on salad bars in farm to school. I've also learned a lot of realities about what that looks like. And so as someone who's coming into this from a very different place than many of the other folks in school food, but wanting to really impact the quality of the produce that's on kids' plates, and also, of course, like how they connect with it. What are some ways that you think we can overcome some of these big barriers that school districts find, like price point, and things that you probably talk forever about price point, but anyway, I'll start with that. Thank you.
Well, there's one experiment going on right in the town next to Berkeley, Richmond, and also in Marin City. It's a group called the Conscious Kitchen. They have just one goal, and that is to buy the food directly from the farmers, all organic. And believe it or not, because they buy it directly. And they buy not, they're not trying to get chicken breasts and thighs. They're taking the drumsticks and barbecue sauce on the drumsticks. And chefs are helping them to make the food. But they're fitting in the USDA price point. They're getting the reimbursement for those meals. And I'm just so impressed at that there's that immediate help from the farmers, that they want to do this. And it's just a little experiment, but I know that it can work. Most of the food that we get for Chez Panisse is very affordable. I mean, but the big expense we have is in the preparation. But if you're not doing that elaborate preparation, you can't really help. But it's, again, we have to invite those food service workers and cook for them. We need to invite them, to our houses. I mean, it's almost like that. They're so abused and so poorly paid that they're resistant.
So we all agree we have a long way to go, but we all today eat better and healthier, and I believe live better and healthier, largely to the inspiration of Alice Waters, and we can't thank you enough, Alice, for coming.
Outside the door, ready, willing, and able to sell Alice's memoir. I know I want to hear about Sex and the Backseat of the Car. I mean, feel free to grab a book on your way out. Appreciate it, guys. Thank you.